They say you can tell everything about a man's character by how he treats someone he believes has nothing to offer him. I have found this to be true in the specific, observable way that things are true when you have had enough decades to test them properly. Not true in theory, true in practice. True the way a load-bearing wall is true. You find out what it is when someone decides to remove it, and by then it is considerably too late to revise your understanding of the architecture. I have been that wall for most of my professional life. I did not advertise it. I did not need to. Walls do not announce themselves. They simply hold the weight, quietly, for as long as the weight needs holding, and they are still standing when the people who underestimated them have finished drawing their conclusions. My name is Raymond Calder. I am 68 years old. I live in Hartford, Connecticut, and I have lived here since 1987, when my wife Ellen and I drove up from Charlotte with everything we owned loaded into a rented trailer and a shared understanding, unspoken but completely mutual, that we were going to build something in the city or we were going to build nothing at all. We had $4,200 in a joint checking account, a contact name at a manufacturing firm on Blue Hills Avenue that may or may not have still been valid, and a specific kind of certainty that belongs to people who have run out of alternatives and discovered, somewhat to their surprise, that it focuses the mind considerably. We built something. It took longer than I expected. It looked different than I planned. I would not change a single year of it. I want to tell you how I present myself to the world, because it is load-bearing information for everything that follows. I am not a complicated-looking man. I am 6 feet even, and I have the build that comes from working with your hands for 30 years before you stop working with your hands. Solid in the way older structures are solid, not impressive at first glance, designed for duration rather than impression. My hair went fully gray by the time I was 53. I keep it cut short, the same way I have kept it since I was in my 20s, because I decided a long time ago that hair is not something I was going to spend cognitive energy on. I own 4 pairs of boots. 2 for work. Thorogood logger style, steel-toed, the left one scar along the toe from a piece of steel channel that slid off a workbench in 2017. 1 pair for church, Rockport, dark brown, purchased in 2019 and worn perhaps 11 times. And 1 pair I have owned since 1994, Red Wing Iron Rangers that I have resold twice, and that fit my feet the way very few things in life fit anything, exactly without accommodation, as though they were made with specific knowledge of where I was going to need to go. I drive a 1998 Ford F-150, dark green, 178,000 miles. I have maintained it myself since the day I bought it, because I know what I'm doing with an engine, and because a truck that you maintain yourself is a truck you understand. It has never failed to start in 26 years. I consider that a relationship worth honoring. Most Sunday mornings, I eat breakfast at a place called Brower's on Farmington Avenue. It opened in 1962. The booths are red vinyl, and the coffee is strong enough to have an opinion about things. And they make a corned beef hash that I have attempted to describe to people for 20 years without ever quite succeeding. The man who runs it now is Pete, who is the grandson of the original owner, and who brings the coffee when he sees me pull into the lot. We do not talk much. That is, in my experience, the architecture of an excellent working relationship. I am telling you all of this because on a Thursday morning in September of last year, my son-in-law Marcus looked at all of it, the boots, the truck, the plain presentation of a plain man, and he made a decision about what it meant. He made it quickly. He made it confidently. He made it in a whisper in a boardroom, in front of 11 people who already knew exactly what it did not mean. He was wrong about me. He had been wrong about me for 9 years. The difference between that Thursday and all the Thursdays before it was that on that particular morning, someone would tell him so. Welcome to Dad's raw revenge. Get comfortable, because this one is going to take you somewhere real. Drop a comment, and let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button, and make sure you're subscribed. Trust me, you are going to want to stay for all of it. I need to tell you what I built, because a story without its foundation is just noise. I spent 22 years as a design and manufacturing contractor. Specifically, I designed tooling systems, the specialized machinery and precision fixtures that production facilities use to manufacture other things consistently and at scale. It is work that most people have never thought about, and that underlies nearly everything manufactured in this country. Every time a component comes off production line and fits exactly where it's supposed to fit, to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch, someone designed and built the system that made that precision repeatable. For 22 years, across hundreds of contracts in 4 states, that someone was frequently me. I incorporated Calder Tooling Solutions in the state of Connecticut in March of 1991. I did it in a spare bedroom of our first house on Woodland Street, on a used drafting table I had bought for $40 in an estate sale, with a telephone that rang more than I had expected, and a legal pad on which I had written down, in 2 columns, what I knew how to do and what I would need to learn. The first column was longer. I kept both. By 2003, I had 17 employees and a production facility on Blue Hills Avenue that I was already planning to outgrow. By 2007, I had 28 employees and a second facility in East Hartford. By 2011, I had 34 employees for ongoing contract with manufacturers whose names appear on products you've used, and a company that generated $6.7 million in annual revenue against operating costs I had managed with a specific, unromantic discipline of a man who grew up without a safety net and retained a permanent memory of that fact. In 2014, I made a decision that changed the shape of everything that followed. I took on a capital partner. The firm was called Aldridge Growth Partners. They were a mid-sized institutional investor with a specific focus on established manufacturing and industrial services businesses that had strong operational fundamentals and limited access to growth capital. They were not glamorous. They were thorough, and they were patient, and they understood the specific kind of value that takes 20 years to build and cannot be recreated in a funding round. We were, in that sense, a reasonable match. In exchange for their capital, $3.4 million, structured as a combination of equity purchase and grow facility, I retained 51% of Calder Tooling Solutions' operating entity. The remaining 49% transferred to a holding structure that Douglas Hecht, my business attorney of now 31 years, had spent 4 months building with the care that Douglas applies to everything, which is to say the care of a man who finds legal architecture genuinely interesting and who has never once, in 31 years, handed me a document he had not read 3 times himself. The holding structure was called Meridian Industrial Partners, LLC. It was registered in Delaware. It held my 51% stake in Calder Tooling Solutions. On every public-facing document related to Calder's operating entity, the majority shareholder was listed as Meridian Industrial Partners, LLC, not Raymond Calder, a name that signified nothing to anyone who had not been told what it signified. That was not concealment. That was structure. There's a difference. And the difference is the kind of thing that takes most people a decade of professional life to understand, and that I had understood since the early years of my contracting career. When I spent enough time watching other people's poorly structured arrangements unravel in disputes and audits and succession events to develop firm opinions about how I was going to do it differently. In 2021, Aldridge Growth Partners made a secondary investment. They acquired a 17% equity stake in a Hartford-based manufacturing and distribution company called Forston Industrial Group. As part of the co-investment structure, Meridian Industrial Partners, my holding entity, participated in the round. By the time the transaction closed in November of 2021, Meridian held 11% of Forston Industrial Group's outstanding equity, the single largest individual shareholder block in the company. I want you to hold that number while I tell you about my son-in-law. Marcus came into my daughter Claire's life in 2015. He was 32 years old, energetic and sharp, and in possession of a particular kind of confidence that accumulates in a man when things have arrived for him steadily and without serious interruption. He had an MBA. He had spent 4 years in corporate strategy at firms that kept him comfortable and pointed him forward. He was, when I first met him, already the kind of man who had a 5-year plan and a 10-year plan, and who treated people differently depending on which plan they appeared in. He was not unkind to Claire. I want to be honest about that, because this story is not about a man who was cruel. He was not. He was attentive in ways that matter for a marriage's daily operation, present in the right rooms at the right times, and he loved his children, my grandchildren, James, who is now 8, and Nina, who is 5, with a warmth that I never doubted and never will. What he did with me was different, and it was so consistent over 9 years that I think it had stopped being a decision and become simply a habit. He had taken my measure in the first months of knowing me and filed a result, and he never reopened the file. The truck, the boots, the diner on Farmington Avenue, the way I dressed for dinners at his house, all of it read, in his system, as a coherent story about a man of modest means and modest accomplishment who posed no professional relevance to anything in Marcus's life. He called me a handyman once, at a dinner with 3 of his colleagues from work. In the tone of a man sharing a detail he finds mildly charming about his domestic life. He said the way someone might say my father-in-law keeps bees or has an unusual relationship with vintage radios. I had, at that point in my life, run a 31-person manufacturing operation for 11 years and was in the second year of a capital partnership with an institutional investor. I said nothing. I passed the rolls. Claire went quiet in the way she has gone quiet since she was 9 years old when something is bothering her and she has decided not to name it in public. Over 9 years, there were many moments like that one. I cataloged none of them and forgot none of them. Both of those things were true simultaneously, which is perhaps the most accurate description of how I have always operated. In January of 2023, Marcus accepted the position of CEO at Forston Industrial Group. It was, by any fair measure, a significant professional achievement. Forston had 140 employees, a reasonable market position, and 8 years of performance that suggested it needed precisely the kind of strategic energy Marcus carried. He accepted with the contained excitement of a man who has been working towards something for a long time and has trained himself not to celebrate too visibly until thing is fully in hand. He did not know, when he accepted, that his new company's largest individual shareholder was a handyman from Farmington Avenue. I found out about the appointment in February of 2023, when Douglas had called me on a Tuesday afternoon and said, in the dry, specific way Douglas delivers information he finds professionally interesting, that my son-in-law had just been named CEO of a company in which Meridian Industrial Partners held an 11% equity position. I sat with that for a moment. Douglas asked me how I wanted to handle the introduction to the board. I told him I wanted to let the board's process handle it. I told him I had no interest in staging anything, engineering a moment, or making a phone call to Forston's outgoing CEO to expedite a conversation that would happen on its own timeline. I told him if the process resulted in a board meeting where Marcus encountered me without prior context, I would handle that circumstance the way I handle every circumstance. Calmly, without drama, and with complete respect for the room. Douglas said, and if the chairwoman introduces you in the middle of Marcus's first formal board presentation? I said that would be the board's scheduling decision. There was a pause on Douglas's end. He said, Raymond, I have been your attorney for 19 years and I want to know for the record that you are one of the most deliberate men I have ever worked with. I told him I took that as a compliment. I told him to make sure every Meridian document was current and accessible. He told me they were. I thanked him. I did not tell Claire. I have thought about that decision more than any other decision in this story, and I remain certain it was correct. Claire knew the broad shape of what I owned. She had always known her father ran a company, always known the truck, and the boots were a choice rather than a constraint. What she did not know was a Forston connection, which predated Marcus entirely, and which had never been relevant to mention when it became relevant. I made the decision not to put her in the position of carrying that information inside her marriage while I waited for the board's process to work itself out. That would have been a weight I had no right to hand her. I will also tell you this. I am aware that protecting her from that weight also meant she could not warn him. I am aware of that. I did not make the decision for that reason. But I am not going to pretend I was unaware of its consequence. If you have been listening for a while, do us one quick favor. Subscribe. A lot of people watch without ever doing it, but it costs you nothing, and it means everything to us. Hit the like button while you're at it, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Marcus called me on a Wednesday evening in early September of 2023. He was in the elevated good spirits of a man 9 months into a role that is going well, and who has begun to feel particular confidence of someone who has survived the steep part of the learning curve and can now see the terrain ahead. He told me the board was holding its first formal quarterly review the following Thursday morning. He said Claire had mentioned I was always interested in business things. He said he thought it might be educational for me to sit in on a real board meeting, see how things work at that level. He said it with the warmth of a man doing someone a minor favor. I said I appreciated the invitation very much. I said I would be there. He said, it's a formal proceeding, Raymond. Real board members, real agenda. A brief pause that he filled with a small laugh. Just want to make sure you know what to expect going in. I said I understood. I thanked him for the context. After I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for a while. Ellen had gone up to read. The house was quiet in the way our house gets quiet after 9 p.m., which is a specific, settled quiet I have been grateful for since the children left. The clock on the microwave said 9:17. I had a glass of water in front of me. I sat, and I looked at nothing in particular, and I let the specific cold stillness that had been sitting in me since February do what it had been doing for 7 months. Holding. Patient. Absolutely certain of itself. I drank the water. I rinsed the glass. I went to bed. Thursday morning, I was up at 5:38. I made coffee at 5:45 and drank at the kitchen table while I read through a contract amendment Douglas had sent over for a separate matter. At 6:55, I went upstairs, showered, dressed. I stood in the garage at 7:10 and looked at my 4 pairs of boots. I put on the Thorogoods, the work boots, the ones with a scar on the left toe, not as a statement, not as a calculated provocation, because I was going to be in a conference room chair for 2 hours, and they are the most comfortable boots I own, and comfort seemed like the criterion that mattered. I drove the F-150 to the Forston Industrial Group offices on Asylum Avenue. I parked in the visitor lot at 8:43. I walked inside, gave my name at the front desk, and was shown to the elevator by a young woman who told me the 4th-floor conference room was already set up. The elevator opened onto a carpeted hallway with framed photographs of Forston facilities on both walls, production floors, loading docks, the kind of institutional photography that communicates operational scale to people who understand what they are looking at. The conference room had an oval table in dark wood, 12 leather chairs, water glasses already filled, and a view of the Hartford skyline through 2 large windows on the north wall. I took the seat nearest the door, which was a seat with the least direct view of the presentation screen, and which no one else had taken, which is generally true of the seat nearest the door in any conference room anywhere. A staff member brought coffee at 8:51. I thanked her. I drank it. The board members arrived between 8:54 and 9:09. 8 of them I had encountered before, through Douglas, through Aldridge, through the ordinary professional intersections of a decade of shared investment context. They greeted me with the restrained warmth of people in a formal setting who understand the shape of a situation without having explicitly discussed it. The remaining 3 I had not met. They introduced themselves with a polite efficiency of people who greet strangers at business meetings the same way every time. None of them said anything about the boots. Marcus arrived at 9:06 with a presentation portfolio and 2 of his direct reports, a man and a woman who carried themselves with the careful energy of people who have been told this morning matters and have taken the instructions seriously. Marcus was in a charcoal suit I had not seen before, well cut, the kind of suit a man buys for the first formal presentation of his tenure, because he understands that the clothing is also a communication. He worked the room efficiently, shaking hands with the focused warmth of someone who had prepared for this morning and is running on the productive side of nervous. He reached me near the end of the circuit. He looked at my boots. 1 beat, brief, unreadable, the trained non-reaction of a man who has learned to absorb small surprises without signaling them. Then he looked up and extended his hand and smiled. He shook my hand. He said, quietly, close enough that only I could hear it clearly, "Raymond, glad you could make it." And then lower, with the lightness of a man who is confident enough in his position to afford a small joke at someone else's expense. "Try not to embarrass me in front of these people." He was already half turning back toward the room when he said it. I said, "Of course, Marcus." I sat back down. I took a sip of my coffee. I looked at the Hartford skyline through the north windows, gray and flat and specific in the September morning light. The chairwoman of the Forston board was a woman named Adele Voss. She had chaired the board since 2020 and had been a member since 2018. She was 63 years old. With gray streak hair she kept pulled back and the manner of someone who has run enough meetings to have developed a finely calibrated sense of which moments require management and which require simply being present and letting the facts do their work. I had met Adele twice before, at events connected to the Aldridge relationship. She had, both times, addressed me by my first name without being reminded of it, which is a small thing that tells you a great deal about a person's professional habits. She called the meeting to order at 9:13. She moved through preliminary items, attendance confirmation, quorum, prior minutes, with the unhurried efficiency of someone who considers these items necessary rather than interesting. Then she set her pen down and looked around the table with the specific, settled attention of a woman who is about to say something she has thought about in advance. She said, "Before we move to Marcus's presentation, I want to address one item of housekeeping that I understand wasn't handled during transition period." She looked at me directly, briefly, then back to the room. "We have a board member present today who has not been formally introduced to our new CEO, and I want to correct that before we proceed." She looked at Marcus. "Marcus, I'd like you to meet Raymond Calder. Raymond is the managing partner of Meridian Industrial Partners, LLC, which holds 11% of Forston's outstanding equity, our largest single shareholder block. Raymond's operating company, Calder Tooling Solutions, has been under contract with Forston in tooling services since 2019. Raymond has held his board seat since the Meridian investment closed in November of 2021. She said it the way she said everything, plainly, without theater, as a statement of facts that existed independently of anyone's reaction to them. The room held a specific quality of silence. Not the silence between agenda items. The other kind. The kind that happens when the information in a room has reorganized itself and everyone present is absorbing the reorganization at slightly different speeds. I looked at Marcus. I want to be precise about what I saw, because I think precision is what this moment deserves. He did not lose his composure. He was too professional and too prepared for this morning, in a general sense, to lose his composure. What happened was subtler than that. There was a moment, I counted 3 seconds, where the forward-moving energy of a confident man running on a prepared track simply stopped. His expression went very still. His eyes moved to me, then to Adele, then down to the presentation portfolio open on the table in front of him. Then he looked back up. He nodded once, the slow, deliberate nod of a man who is recalibrating rather than agreeing. He looked at me with an expression that I will describe only as the face of a man doing arithmetic he was not expected to do in this room on this morning. Working backward through 9 years, reassigning values to data points he had already filed and closed. He said, "Raymond." His voice was steady. He had that much. I apologize. I wasn't aware of the full picture of the board composition. I said, "No need to apologize, Marcus. These things happen during transitions." He said, "Thank you for being here." I said, "Happy to be here." I meant it completely. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. What I actually felt was something I have been trying to find the right word for since that morning, and have not quite managed. Not satisfaction. That is too simple and too clean for what it was. Not relief, though there was some of that. Something more like the specific, physical sensation of a weight being set down after you have carried it for long enough that you had stopped noticing it was there. 9 years of bread passing. 9 years of Claire going quiet at dinner tables. 9 years of James and Nina absorbing the weather of rooms they were too young to read. 9 years of trying not to embarrass me in front of these people. Wait. Set down. On a Thursday morning in Hartford, in a conference room with a gray skyline through the north windows and 11 people who had watched it land. Adele moved on. She is not a woman who lingers on moments that have completed themselves. She said, "Wonderful. Marcus, we're ready for your presentation whenever you'd like to begin." Marcus presented for 49 minutes. I am going to tell you something honest about those 49 minutes, because honesty is the only currency this story has. He was good, genuinely good. He knew his numbers with the fluency of someone who had spent 3 months building them from the ground up rather than inheriting them from a deck. His strategic framework was coherent and specific, He answered the board's questions with the combination of confidence and genuine intellectual engagement that marks a person who has thought about the problem rather than just prepared to present about it. He looked at me 4 times during those 49 minutes. The first time was when he referenced the call to supply agreement. He said the contract number, paused for one beat that was almost imperceptible, and continued. The second was during a discussion of operational vendor relationships, when he made eye contact with me briefly in the general sweep of the room and then moved on. The third was near the end of his strategic overview, when he said something about the importance of understanding a company's existing relationships before optimizing them. And the fourth was during the Q&A. During the Q&A, I asked one question. I asked it the way I ask all questions, without emphasis, without theater, as a man who wants a specific piece of information and is asking for it because he wants it. I asked about the renewal timeline and rate structure on the Calder Tooling Services Agreement and what his thinking was on the renegotiation that would come due in 14 months. He answered it completely. He had the current contract terms in front of him, had clearly read them, and gave me a thoughtful response about the strategic value of the relationship and his intention to approach the renewal as a long-term partnership rather than an annual transaction. I nodded. I said that sounded like the right approach. I wrote 2 words on my legal pad. I did not tell him those 2 words were right approach, which is what I had written, because that was not information the room needed. The meeting adjourned at 11:19 a.m. People gathered their things with the organized efficiency of people who have other things to get to. Adele said goodbye to me at the door and confirmed she would see me at the December quarterly. I told her I would be there. She left. Marcus was at the far end of the table in a conversation with one of his direct reports. I did not go to him. I collected my legal pad, capped my pen, put on my jacket. I was at the door when he said my name. I turned around. His direct report had stepped away. The room was empty except for the 2 of us and the Hartford skyline through the windows and the ordinary ambient sound of a building going about its Thursday. He walked toward me. He stopped a few feet away. He looked like a man who has something he needs to say and has spent the last 49 minutes deciding how to say it correctly. He said, "Raymond, I owe you an apology." I said, "Marcus, you don't owe me anything." He said, "What I said before the meeting." I said, "You don't owe me anything." I said it the same way the second time. Steady, level, not warm and not cold. The tone of a man who is telling the truth and is finished with the topic. What I will tell you is this. Your strategic presentation was strong. The board is going to want more granularity on the supply chain consolidation in December. Start building that analysis now, not in November. And the Calder contract renewal is going to be a straightforward conversation. I have no interest in making it difficult. He looked at me for a long moment. He said, "I didn't know who you were." I said, "I know." He said, I didn't know." He stopped. He started again. "All of it. I didn't know any of it." I said, "I understand that, Marcus." I looked at him directly, without heat, without performance. "Now you do." I left it there, because that was a true and complete thing, and everything I might have added to it would have been something other than what I wanted to be. I walked to the elevator. I wrote it down. I nodded to the woman at the front desk. I pushed through the glass door onto Asylum Avenue into a September morning that had turned clear and bright and cool, the Hartford air doing what it does in September, when the summer finally releases its hold, and the light gets sharp, and the city looks more like itself than it does the rest of the year. I walked to the F-150. I got in. I sat for a moment. The engine was off. The city went past the windows the way cities go past. Indifferent, continuous, with no particular opinion about what had happened that morning in a 4th-floor conference room on Asylum Avenue. Then I started the truck. I drove to Brower's on Farmington Avenue. Pete saw me park and had the coffee ready when I came through the door. I sat in my regular booth. I ordered the corned beef hash. I watched Farmington Avenue do what it does on a Thursday morning in September. People in good coats, a delivery truck parked halfway on the curb, 2 pigeons investigating something near the crosswalk with the focused energy of creatures who have decided this is worth their time. The hash was exactly what it always is. I ate most of it. I left $4 on the table. I drove home. There is something I want to say before I close, and I am going to say it carefully because I have thought about it carefully. I am not going to say it to Marcus. I said what I needed to say to Marcus in that conference room, and it was not this. This is for you. A man does not need to announce what he has built. He does not need to dress in the right clothes or park in the right lot or introduce it at the right dinner. He can simply build it correctly and completely, and trust that the truth of a thing exists whether or not the people around him have been introduced to it yet. The introduction will come. It always comes. The only variable is who is present when it does and what they understand about themselves in that moment. The most dangerous thing about a quiet man is not what he says. It is what he has already done and what he was doing while you were busy deciding he was nothing. 9 years of Thursday mornings. 1 boardroom. 1 chairwoman. 45 seconds. If you enjoyed this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being a part of Dad's Raw Revenge. I will see you on the next one.